is working with us, and so is the Blades. And I have a short video here that was put together for us by the Blades.
Is a massive electromagnetic pulse. It can be released from a nuclear device detonated at a high altitude, destroying electrical grids for hundreds of miles. The aftermath of such an attack could be devastating. Distribution of food and medicine would be nearly impossible. There would be a shortage of clean water, and first responders would be left with no means of communication. Now, this may sound like something out of an apocalyptic thriller, but this is not fiction. This is a critical national security issue that leaders from both parties take seriously, because they know that rogue nations and terrorist groups dream of a world without the United States.
After 9/11, Congress ordered a series of studies on weapons of mass destruction. In 2004, the EMP Commission delivered a report on the threat of an electromagnetic pulse attack on the United States.
The EMP Commission published 5 reports, 3 were classified and 2 were unclassified. The 2 unclassified were in 2004 and 2008. They laid out a scenario where a very entry-level weapon of the 20 kiloton range was lobbed at not a very high altitude over Cincinnati, Ohio.
Michael Del Rosso is an engineer and Pentagon consultant. He has worked with the EMP Commission, and he has participated in confidential congressional briefings on nuclear threats to America.
And the reason they chose that target is because that weapon with the radius of line of sight at the altitude, which was a nominal altitude, would have covered 74.5% of all the electric generating capacity in the United States and 83% of the substations in the United States, the majority of the population.
Bill Graham, who was the chair, the one statement he made that I think needs to be remembered is EMP is one of a small number of effects that has existential consequences that could threaten the existence of the United States.
George Baker is Professor Emeritus of Applied Science at James Madison University. He sits on the board of advisors for the Congressional Task Force on National and Homeland Security.
The effects could be so widespread that, in fact, you'd have breakdown of governance. In Bill Graham's testimony, he thought that upwards of 50% of the population would die within the first year.
For the Record has learned that in 1995, a Russian think tank presented a report to the Russian army recommending the military align with rogue nations, sharing both weapons of mass destruction and missile technologies.
There was a testimony in 2004 by Soviet flag officers that they rather sheepishly said that technology for super EMP weapons had actually leaked out to North Korea and other rogue nations.
We think enough word of it has leaked out, it's not a very technically complex idea, that it could well be the case that the North Koreans could pull off something like that.
There's no one that would deny with any credibility that the reason why North Korea and Iran are self-professed emerging nuclear threats to the United States of America is because Russia and China want them to be and have enabled them to be. This is not idle thought. This is what nation states like Iran and North Korea have spent billions of dollars developing this capability. They're doing it for a reason, and they say the reason is the fact that they see the United States as their primary adversary.
On July 9, 1962, the United States conducted a high-altitude nuclear test over the Pacific Ocean. It was called the Starfish Prime Test, and the electrical pulse from the blast was felt 900 miles away in the Hawaiian Islands. The data collected from that event showed the U.S. military the potential damage an EMP can cause, information they have had for more than 50 years.
After the Starfish Prime test, the U.S. government immediately took steps to protect military assets.
The Department of Defense, as they built out the Minuteman system, the ground system and the missiles, included EMP protection in the Minuteman system. It's been 50 years ago.
So we've hardened that capability tremendously, again, at the cost of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But our civilian grid, upon which 99% of the military's electricity incomes, is dependent upon. It's essentially unprotected.
I think that's largely right. I think the only civilian that were hardened were the president's airplane and maybe some of his command and control, so you want to consider that civilian. But no one was thinking of protecting the civilian infrastructure.
And that is the great conundrum here for me, is that one of two things is true. Either the military has this wrong, and this is no problem, and therefore we should stop spending all the money to harden against it. Or if it is a problem, then we should harden the grid upon which the military depends for 99% of its electricity needs in this continent.
Nobody's in charge of the electric grid. You think Department of Energy? No. Department of Energy basically works on nuclear waste and funds nuclear laboratories. There's a small office that deals with electric grids, but nobody that has any real power. This is something that is not being dealt with. It is improvements in it are fought by industry, and it's extremely frustrating because it's very dangerous to let this grid sit there the way it is while the Russians and Chinese have fully and completely protected theirs.
Okay.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you that on this issue, the Russians and Chinese are more responsible than we are.
In 2004, the Congressional EMP Commission estimated that it would take a one-time investment of $2 billion to harden the entire U.S. electrical grid against an EMP. Today, that estimate has actually been reduced to $500 million. That's less than 1% of what the Government Accountability Office reported was wasted in 2012. And that's our show for this evening. Thank you for joining us on For the Record. We'll see you next time.
Hope you didn't come here tonight thinking you're going home and feel real good and sleep good tonight. Pretty much covered how devastating this would be. There's a side of this that I really like to talk about, and that's the positive side. That is the benefit of what could come to Texas by taking the simple step of making sure we had a reliable electrical system even in a hostile environment. Because right now, Texas has good power, good electrical power. It's dependable. We don't have many brownouts and blackouts. And when the power does go out, it comes back on pretty quick. If many of you have noticed, quite often in the last couple of years, that there will be a momentary interruption. The lights will go off for a few seconds and come right back on again. That's a direct result of the good monitoring control systems that have been put in to bring in power from another direction when a transformer goes out. Rather than having to go out and replace that transformer, they're able to redirect the power. So power companies have done a lot to make sure that their customers, residential and commercial, have power with very little interruptions, because interruptions are very, very expensive to businesses. Folks at Texas Instruments told us that a 10-second power interruption to them would cost them a minimum of $75,000. There are a lot of industries in which a 10-second interruption would require them to throw out the entire product line that was in the process of being made and start over again. So it gets to be very expensive. And Texas takes a lot of pride in being a country that that was a state that is open for business. We have a governor that ran around the country trying to talk people into coming to Texas. We spend a lot of your taxpayer money bribing companies through our enterprise fund to come here in Texas. And a lot of you are paying more property tax than you should be paying because you have local entities called EDCs and city council that will give tax abatements to businesses to bring them in there under the guise that it's going to, help you out. Well, I can show you study after study that shows that is a bad idea, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. But the point is, we do a lot to try to bring businesses in. As the world outside of this audience becomes more aware of how serious this threat really is, think about what an attractive carrot Texas could hold up if they were in the process of hardening their grid and could tell businesses and families that are looking for a place to move, hey, in Texas, when the lights go out in the rest of the country, they're going to come back on first here in Texas. Or maybe when the lights go out in the rest of the country, they're only going to blink here in Texas. We could get rid of the enterprise fund. We could stop the tax abatements. We could start charging people to move to Texas. Believe me. And the military, most people don't realize, but the military presence in Texas contributes in excess of $150 billion a year to our economy. That's a lot of money. There's going to be another round of base closings. They're already working on it right now. It's called BRAC, Base Realignment and Closings. I contend that if Texas could tell the Pentagon, we are in the process of hardening our electrical grid, because every one of the military bases relies on commercial power. They use the same power that you do. So when your lights go out, their lights go out. But if we could tell the Pentagon, hey, we're going to have a hardened grid, I don't think they would even consider closing one of the military bases here in Texas. Matter of fact, I think they would move other assets here. In a heartbeat, they would do that. I think I have had informal conversations with folks in the military, and they're not in a position to make any commitment, but at the working level, they think that it would be the greatest thing that Texas could possibly do to attract the military to come here. This is an issue. I've talked with a number of first responder groups, and I imagine we probably have some in the audience here tonight. And when I talked to them about their plans, and asked them, I said, I bet you got your plans for tornadoes, for hurricanes, for widespread fires, for riots, earthquakes, just about everything. I said, tell me about, how do you start those plans? How do you put one into place? And they'll basically say, well, we start with our call list. I said, well, wait a minute. What about if you had a disaster situation in which you had no communications? What would you do then? And they kind of looked at me and said, well, we've got our handheld rate. I said, no communications. What would you do? Well, we really haven't planned for that, because that's how we get started. See, we don't have any concept of being totally without electricity. People have a hard time making thought process along the line when you have no electricity. So that brings up the starting point. And I said, well then, have you thought about what are the guys going to do? I said, how long do you think you can hold your crews together? And I've told this to the power companies too. I said, after about the third day, when the food in the house is right thin, and they're riding about 3 blocks down the street, and your wife is in tears, and the kids are crying, how many first responders are going to leave their family to go out and do their job? There will be some that will do that day 3. How about day 5? Day 10? When the toilets are overflowing and then there's no more water, and you can only find water in a bucket somewhere that only the man can carry. Folks, it gets to where people haven't thought this through in some of these things, but it's the reality of it. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I couldn't say this a year ago, but I can say it now. We've had a forum in Texas. We had it at the end of April. First one that had been held in the nation. Most of the people that you saw in the videos up here, but Peter Pry was a key individual, and most of the others were part of our symposium, plus about 20 more that are experts in the area attended. so we could start the process of a solution. As I started the whole event by telling people that the purpose of the meeting was to move from what I call Chicken Little, the sky is falling, to the phase of we know it could fall, let's do something about it, and here's something we're going to go do. That was the purpose of it, and so that's where we have moved to in there. But the thing that's standing in our way, and I call it the unholy alliance. This is not a really politically correct chart, but it's the best way I know of to describe it, between the power companies, and there's hundreds of them in Texas, between the generators and the distributors and the transmission companies, the Public Utility Commission, and ERCOT. They're all part of what I call the electrical cabal. They are self-supporting, self-defending, self-regulating organization that's made of people that have been in the power company, that are in government, or vice versa, that move around. And they're the ones that are standing between us and getting something done. They have fairy tale after fairy tale that they will tell about how this can't be done, it doesn't need to be done, it shouldn't be done, and lots of excuses for not doing it. They wrote a whole paper last session that I had to spend a whole weekend rebutting the half-truths and misrepresentations they put together in their, quote, white paper to educate our legislators to try to convince them to not vote for the bill. Good news is we actually got a plank in the Republican platform. People thought it would never happen. I went down to the Republican convention, got there a day ahead of time. I was the only legislator I know of that showed up down there to testify, but I testified on this and several other items, all of which ended up in as a platform. But we do have what I consider to be the right set of words in our Republican platform. In as much as this is not a partisan issue, but I really don't have much influence on the Democratic platform, so I could only get it in the Republican one. What I'm about to say, if you don't remember anything else I've said tonight, I would ask you to remember this. When you leave here tonight, you are going to make a choice. You don't have a choice in that. You will make a choice. You'll either leave here and say, gee, that was interesting. I really wish somebody would do something about it, and you'll go back home and come back next month for another night of entertainment. Or you will recognize what this organization and others like this is all about, and the name of it says it real clearly. It's we the people, because we the people are the government. It's not that group down in Austin, and it's not just the group up in Washington. Our government is all of us. And the problem we've got to where we are today is that the we that aren't in Austin and not in Washington have abdicated our responsibility of watching what they're doing and calling them out on it enough to stop what they're doing. And as somebody once said, what we tolerate, we get more of. And so as long as we tolerate it, without them hearing from us, you're going to get more of what they've been dishing out. So you can leave here tonight, go home, say, gee, good entertainment, come back next month to begin on another subject to be entertained. Or you can go home and pick up the we the people part of the responsibility and contact folks that you have an influence over. And believe me, you have an influence over your elected officials at all levels if you will just communicate with them. A drop here and a drop there doesn't have much impact. But have any of you seen some of those streams out there after this rain? When you get a lot of drops in there, it becomes powerful. It becomes a tsunami. And that's what we need with our elected officials. Not so much to convince them to go do what is right, but to convince them that you understand what the problem is and you want it fixed and you will back them up on doing it. You won't later call them out and say, why don't you go do that dumb thing? Because we got a lot of officials out there that really are looking at this as another Y2K kind of thing. That if they do it, they're gonna, you know, there's gonna be ridicule. I get a lot of ridicule right now. The summit we had down there in Austin, that interview with the Texas Tribune, they wrote their article, and I knew when I talked to the guy that it wasn't gonna be good. The headline in the article says, Texas Senator warns of death rays from outer space. That was his title. You go look it up on Texas Tribune in there. Look up the rebuttal I wrote to that. I got calls from the power company commending me on the article and what was read. They're starting to thaw, but they need to hear from you. Your power company needs to hear from you that you want to know what they're doing about this. Your representative, your new senator, I think will work with me on it, but it wouldn't hurt to give him a call. He'll know you're out there. Our lieutenant governor, our governor's office, the most effective thing is a handwritten note, and then a typed letter, and then an email, and a phone call. They're all important, but if you take a few minutes to do a handwritten note, it will make a huge difference. For some questions, and yes, sir?
I'm going to ask, what have you done to protect your family and your money from this threat?
That's not the issue we're talking about up here. I mean, it's what I've done. This is about the power company. This threat is no different than what you would do if you really believe in the riots coming or the government going berserk or whatever it is. You need to be self-sustained. What you can do is you can, not that it'll be much use to you, but radios that you put in a Faraday cage. A Faraday cage is a metal container. I believe Dr. Peter Pry talked about a garbage can, works just fine. Microwave oven works fine. For protection, you get an old microwave oven, you could use that to store some things that you'd like to preserve in it. Just don't use the one that you use every day and turn it off within there. But it's the common sense things of what you would have to do if you couldn't reach any further than what you can get to on foot to survive any kind of disaster. Yes.
I think right there at the end you said that they referred to it as another Y2K. I'm assuming you mean that you know, we're not doing nothing. But of course, my husband and Doc worked through that time period on helping companies, you know, make it through that time. People think that it ended up not being a big deal, but there were a lot of people working behind the scenes.
No, you're absolutely right about that, but one of the things is all that behind the scenes work never got any publicity. So most people came away thinking it was a big spoof. And I know exactly, I know, because we worked in similar things. That is absolutely, you know, true.
How much of and what part of Texas is covered by the Texas grid?
Okay, that is only a minor problem. You are connected to the Texas grid. It has to do with the paperwork and the agreement with the people in Washington. And it is a subject that is being discussed about moving those parts of Texas that are not in ERCOT into ERCOT. But whether or not that happens, you can still have the grid protected. He said one more. And that, the short answer is no. Not per se. It can be hardened, but that's an added level of protection. Okay. Thank you all very much. Call up. I've got cards back there. We passed out cards. I'll be glad if you have questions. I'd be glad to answer them. Call my office, talk to me, be glad to. But please make those phone calls. That's what we need to make this happen. God bless you.